What entrepreneurs need to know about China. Now this is thoughtful. Hello, I'm Trevor Lai in Shanghai. This week on Thoughtful China, we're bringing you a special episode about challenges facing entrepreneurs when they take on China. Mailman organized T13, the second Transition China conference, in April at the Langham Hotel in Shanghai. Thoughtful China's guest host, Ruth Kuguru, was there to bring you exclusive interviews with some of the speakers. Today we're sharing those interviews as well as highlights from the event.
We're here at the Transition China 2013 event today with Andrew Collins, the founder. So Andrew, can you tell us about the event and what your motivation behind pulling this together has been?
Sure. I mean, it's a creation of our company, Mailman, in partnership with the Entrepreneurs Organization. And the concept behind the event was really to celebrate the iconic journeys that many entrepreneurs tackle when coming to China. It's not an easy place to come and do business. So it's an opportunity for all of us to take one day off of what we do. I haven't checked email all day, and I'm just going to listen to some inspiring stories and hopefully take something away from that and feel somewhat better about myself in being here in China. Okay.
And what is the vision for this going forward? I mean, this is the second year you've run this event. Yes. Where do you see it going forward?
Well, I look at it like a library of insights, and we try to feature, we handpick each speaker depending on their credibility within a category. I mean, we've got guys today who are pioneers in food and beverage, in gaming, in media and entertainment. So we handpick these guys, we get with them and go, would you be willing to share your story, share your desires, and share those passions and that journey of discovery, of failure, and ultimately success?
Well, we noticed that on the panel today, there's only one woman. So could you comment on that? Is there a shortage of women entrepreneurs in China, or?
I think the weight is way towards the men in terms of foreign expatriate entrepreneurs. Mm-hmm. And if you look at the people speaking today, they're all foreigners. They're all sharing their story. We reached out to Alison, who we're delighted to have on board, and she's just a bundle of joy. And we're looking to get connected with more female entrepreneurs. And I think also a lot of the big entrepreneur organizations are dominated by men. So it's been challenging, but also I think there's a huge opportunity for women to get into entrepreneurship in China, just as Alison has done.
Well, thank you for being here today, Andrew.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for being here today, Brian.
Thank you.
So is China one of the countries you're active in now, or what are your plans for moving here in the future, and how important is this market to you?
Yeah, so China actually just recently crept up to the number 3 in our network in terms of number of active unique devices every day, and so we definitely see a lot of potential having some business run here, but we haven't actually officially entered China yet. In Asia right now, our main presence is in Tokyo for Japan. It's kind of we started with Japan mainly because one of our strategic investors offered to help us set up there, and I figured it would be a good learning experience.
Right, it's kind of an easy entry to China. China, I guess, Asia light.
It's still very different, and the campaign I mentioned that we launched with was with Lawson's, and I think there's some potential interesting tie over with them over there and them here. So, again, it could be interesting just to have that initial sort of way in. But once we see the partners that we could work with here, we'll figure out who we want to launch with.
Okay. So fulfillment, or let's talk about the business process in terms of how you actually get to have somebody using an app and actually fulfilling that order or that happy moment, mm-hmm. and with all the advertisers. Can you talk about the process and some of the challenges along those lines?
So when we first started the company, it was very much so about physical rewards, right? And I mentioned briefly during my talk that there was a sort of a aha moment where we were like, yeah, let's try to diversify beyond that and also do virtual rewards as well. So it's easier to fulfill per se because this is something you could use online, and even sometimes within the game. So imagine an insurance company sponsoring a free life in a game, stuff like that, right? So there's a lot of interesting ways that we allowed ourselves to de-risk the fulfillment challenges that we were having. However, when there is a physical campaign, the way you would encounter a reward with Kiip is very simple. You just have to be using or playing a game or an app that has our SDK in it, right? And there's about 1,000 of them right now, so you'll encounter it. But we don't tell you how to get things, so it's just it happens as you do what you're doing. But let's say you get something physical, like a Propel bottle of water, which is one of the Pepsi brands we work with in the US, which is a fitness water brand. The fulfillment actually happens through retailers that actually happen to have mobile couponing capabilities. And so this is actually something that they need to build into their technology first. If not, there's this very terrible flow of using typed in PIN codes where a cashier literally has to like type in like a 8-digit code. So either way right now is kind of the main ways that we work with right now, just to make sure that there is no disconnect between the mobile redemption and what you actually do when you walk into the store. But we struck partnerships, for example, with 7-Eleven where we could work across all 7,500 of their mobile coupon-enabled stores in the States. And we started to diversify to more retailers. Like we did something with Toys R Us and Hasbro recently and stuff like that.
Okay. Well, then there's a brand side, but then what about the agency side? Because I imagine they're a major part of what you do. How do you navigate helping them understand the value you're adding and how to work with you?
Right now, a majority of our business comes from the media agencies because that's where a majority of the budget does lie. And a lot of what we're doing is a branding related thing, and sometimes there's performance, but that would be the performance elements of the agencies that do buy from us. But yeah, we decided to kind of take the approach of, client first, right? They'll understand sort of the nuances of the model. They're driven by, driving sales, and initially, at least for example, Pepsi is a perfect example. When we first started working with Pepsi, the campaign was initiated by the client first, and then we graduated, so to speak, to Omnicom or OMD, their agency of record for media, and they started to buy from us more efficiently. The agency was brought in to make the process more efficient and more scalable.
Which advertisers have been your favorite to work with since you guys
They're
began?
all my favorite.
Of course.
I think there's ones that have really taken it a step further and have helped us build our business while ideating what we had. Like, again, Pepsi is a perfect example. They were one of the main reasons why we ended up going into fitness and health. They pushed us in that direction. They were like, it's great that we could do one brand like Pepsi Max with gaming, but why not use Propel for fitness and really let's see if this could work. And so they experimented with it, and it obviously became something very, very successful in seeing the redemption flow. I believe the coupon that we did with some of our campaigns with Pepsi have been the highest redeemed coupons in essentially their entire company's history, which is very exciting. And then Procter & Gamble, for example, we did a campaign with one of their brands, Secret, which the women watching will understand what it is. It's a female deodorant brand, and it's kind of awkward to give away free deodorant, right? They wanted to target like women runners, and we actually ended up doing a campaign where if you ran and you logged a run, you would get a free MP3 download for your next workout playlist, courtesy of Secret. So it was really kind of thinking outside the box, and this was an idea that they came up with. It wasn't us. So like I love clients that try to help make the business even more helpful to them so that I can help them even more.
It's more collaborative.
Exactly.
For sure. So you've talked about game apps, talked about fitness apps. Any other kind of apps that you've worked with? So
the two other major verticals we're in right now, one is productivity and utility. So think to-do lists. Finishing a to-do list is a very achievement moment-oriented thing. And then the second is food and recipes. So think recipe search apps where you can bookmark a recipe or even submit a recipe, and these things are very significant. We arrived to the recipe search as an app concept because of the desire for a lot of advertisers to reach moms, right? So that was one of the insights we had, was we realized that a lot of moms were using recipe apps, and we started to integrate there.
Thank you for joining us today, Henry.
Thank you.
So the Chinese are huge gamers. So can you talk a little bit about how important this market is for you?
China was actually the first market where we opened up the office outside of Finland. So it is absolutely leading biggest market for us in terms of growth, fan engagement. China has a strategic importance in everything and anything we do.
Okay. Do you think China is more advanced in terms of gaming or in terms of devices compared to the rest of the markets you operate in?
China is very fast moving, so nothing is constant here. So the number of smart devices, the growth of that is phenomenal. It's just that you have to be on top of the game all the time to stay buoyant and float.
That makes sense. So based on that, how have you localized or customized the game for this market?
We look into the Chinese cultural elements, what we want to then also export out of China. China is actually a strategic component for us. It's the Rovio to China, China to the world, what we say, and that happens on all screens. So what we have here is actually deep cultural stories that we can repackage and bring them to the world and entertain the whole globe.
Do you have an example of how you've done that already, or is that in the plans going forward?
We've done it in numerous ways. Moon Festival 2011, where we packaged the Moon Festival. Tens of millions of people outside of China first time heard about Moon Festival. Chinese New Year, we looked into the Year of Dragon and customizing the game based on the elements of that festive season.
So what could the West learn then from the Chinese market, since you previously said, here they're moving fast and advanced? Is there anything specific that the West could learn about?
Great deal, of course. China has a very, very strong spirit of entrepreneurship, a very entrepreneurial environment where people are working. So I would say that you have to just live part of the Chinese culture, and take an example of living in Shanghai gives you a possibility to really look at the global market, very different viewpoint than being in a western part of the world.
Okay, so switching to kind of the entrepreneurial growth of Rovio, you went from 12 people to 600 people. And can you talk about maybe 2 or 3 key elements that help propel that growth?
So what we stand for as a brand, so when you look at the brand element of Angry Birds, it is about fun, entertainment and quality. You got to stand very true for your brand elements. So that's one. Culture, the company's own culture is really, really important. Finally, I would say passion for the brand love and things what you do is the key thing. With these you can scale even a small organization to hundreds of people and you don't lose the magic.
Right, right. And so another thing you talked about was leading partnerships and how partnerships was key for you all, specifically not having a big marketing budget. Was there a specific tipping point where you felt like you were able to find those leading partnerships to really propel your growth?
Target setting. So we set the target of 100 million downloads from day one, when people are just looking for hundreds of thousands of downloads. That makes you think differently. You think big. When you think big and you don't have much resources, you actually kick on the creativity gear and you start looking for opportunities where you can complement with your brand assets or your assets overall, the partner's assets, and that becomes a much bigger opportunity for both.
Great. I guess my last question is, do you have a favorite Angry Bird? And if so, why is that your favorite?
Okay, certainly. My favorite Angry Bird is the Bomb Bird. It's chill out, easygoing until things goes horribly wrong and it's kaboom.
All right, great. Thank you. Thank you for being with us today.
Thanks.
Thanks for coming in, Allison. So I'm going to start with asking you about business in China. As an entrepreneur, what have you found the biggest challenges to be?
Well, I think the first thing I'd like to just comment is I don't think the challenges in China are any different to the challenges elsewhere. I mean, obviously we could say it might be a little bit harder, there might be more of a struggle, but I do believe that being an entrepreneur takes, a whim, it takes passion, it takes a little bit of guts to try your idea.
So nothing different than you find anywhere else in the world?
Well, there's the obvious ones like culturally. You have to embrace the culture and understand the culture in China, but in terms of starting your career and your business, I think it's whatever country you're in takes the same strength and conviction and passion.
Okay, well that's a great segue into culture, because if you think about your brand and what it represents and the Chinese culture, there seems to be quite a huge gap in between. Can you talk a little bit about your strategy and marrying your brand with Chinese culture?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think I've mentioned possibly on past shows that Mary Ching is all about the tensions of opposites. So it's a tension of East meets West, which is embracing my heritage, being Eurasian. And I think it's also embracing the tensions of women, being strong yet vulnerable. And I think also what's really interesting about our product and the history of shoes in China is that, over 100 years ago, there was Bound Feet and Lotus shoes, which was considered really iconic. And it's kind of ironic that women were seen as sexual but only allowed to be at home, because obviously with Bound Feet they were really limited with being able to go out and explore. And I think what's amusing to myself actually is that Mary Ching is embracing sexuality and independence and actually encouraging women to go out there and fight for themselves and be independent. And I think that's really interesting tension of history of how it's changing.
And would you say there's also a correlation between what's happening now in terms of more women being financially independent and wanting to explore, I guess, the West? And as China opens up, would you say a lot of it is timing for the brand as well?
Oh, absolutely. There's certainly a saying, you've got to be in the right place at the right time. Actually, a leading architect in England, Thomas Heatherwick, once said to me, you know, are you great? And I looked at him, I thought, wow, that's a big question. And he said, you know, I was never the best, but I was at the right place at the right time, and I'm good, but it takes also the opportunity. And I think I would agree with him. I think I was here at the right time, in the right place. I've been lucky that being Eurasian, I've been embraced by the Chinese culture, and I have sensitivities towards it. I'd like to think there's some talent behind Mary Ching, but that's for our consumer to determine.
Speak to it. Another question, you know, we've heard a lot about entrepreneurship today and how it's all about passion and really believing what you do. But you know, if you think about I've heard a lot about how you grew up. And what you're doing now, there's also a tension between that. And how would you say, I guess, your upbringing has influenced what you're doing now?
Yeah, of course. I think all individuals are a product of their upbringing and background. I mean, we all go to therapy to talk about our parents, right? Not that I have, but I probably should. And I think who I am today is obviously a product of my upbringing. I was very privileged. I was a diplomat's daughter. I went to boarding schools from the age of 10, but boarding school was very rigid, and I was really forced into a box and, you know, wore uniform, and I was a prefect, and I had to be a team player and, you know, the captain, and obviously it was self-placed pressures, or ambition, I guess you could call it. But I think that kind of rigidness maybe enhanced me to be rebellious later, because I didn't want to fit in. And I was kind of being squeezed into this box that really wasn't me. And I remember I wanted to dye my hair purple. I wanted to study design. My father, being a diplomat, being Chinese, he didn't believe in design. He didn't believe in standing out. So he always said to me, you can't dye your hair red because then you're never going to get a job. So I remember when I went to art school, first thing I did was dye my hair 7 colors. But you know, going back to the schooling, I think, you know, having been expelled twice, I think that's a clear indication that I didn't really fit in or didn't want to fit in. Yeah. And if you look at my adult life, I think I still don't want to fit in, but I've kind of embraced being different, and that's actually what makes us stand out.
Thanks for coming in, Alison. Always good to have you.
Thanks for having me.
Let me start off by asking about what you see as the keys for success in China for entrepreneurs today.
Well, I think the first thing that people making their own journey and way in China is to be really passionate about what they do, to be focused, to spend all their energy and time to do things, and secondly, to do it in a realistic time frame. It is very difficult for things to happen in your timing. It happens on other people's timing in China.
In China. And when you talk about being focused, I mean, I think it's certainly a challenge that all entrepreneurs face. Do you think it's particularly different in China?
Yeah, I do, because you can be so distracted by countless things that come in your way of, you know, setting up a business is challenging. It's not a matter of going to one office to fill out a form and it's done within 2 days. Renting property, hiring staff, all of those things can take the energy away from what it is that you're trying to achieve and accomplish.
And I know you've been involved with a lot of entrepreneurs in the past and also done some entrepreneurial things yourself. Could you comment on maybe the art market, for example?
Well, about 6 or 7 years ago, we were involved in what was probably China's first sort of certainly managed art auction through Eastlink Art Auction, and that went pretty well until the financial crisis. I guess the art market is still going well after a dip of about 2 years, but I heard just today that Christie's are coming in with the first Western auction licence and will be launching in September. So they've obviously got big plans and big ambitions. Yeah,
it's got to be picking up. Yeah. And then when you look at, I guess, culture in general, you've had a lot of experience. There's art, there's media, there's food. Could you comment on media and food and maybe where you see the opportunities are going forward? Yeah,
well, media is obviously my area of expertise and specialty, and there's nowhere in the world that is changing as fast as China, and there are continuous opportunities for people, particularly in the digital mobile space, to develop apps, to develop new technology. We're all moving into what they call robotic buying, real-time bidding, and there's something around the corner, new around the corner, virtually every week in China. So media, there are tons of opportunities. Food, I think the big challenge is safety. As someone said the other day, you can't eat the chicken, you can't eat the pork, and you can't drink the water. At least there's Scotch whisky. So, but I think the food safety is particularly an issue that's you know, concerning many of us that live in China, and in fact the Chinese people as well.
Right, and therefore perhaps presenting an opportunity from an entrepreneurial standpoint.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, the organic, you know, growing, where you can track the food from farm to table, and those sort of things are obviously going to be more important. And it's not just the food that you eat on the table, it's how it got there, fertilisers used, that sort of thing that people are now taking a big interest in.
So telling the story behind the food, I think,
yeah,
is a big opportunity. Thanks for being on the show, Doug.
Sure, it's my pleasure. Anytime.
Thanks for coming in today, Michael. How important are sports like tennis in Asia compared to the West? Is there still a lot of opportunity for growth, or do you feel like we've matured? This sport is.
That's a very good question. Asia is considered the last untapped market as far as the sport of tennis goes. You know, you have the United States and of course Europe, which are very saturated, long histories. Obviously, all the Grand Slams, the major Grand Slams are in those countries. So the Asia marketplace is certainly where the world of tennis looks towards its next growth.
Sponsorship is always a major part of sports. In China, do you feel like companies and sponsorship is mature, or are people now stepping up to actually take advantage of the opportunity?
The sponsorship we enjoy is incredible, to be quite frank. We are the #1 Masters level event in the world in terms of corporate support, with multinationals, which understand the concept of sponsorship. We find now, after having been in the marketplace for 16 years, is that now the Chinese brands, brands such as China UnionPay or China Construction Bank, are understanding and using sports marketing, specifically sponsorship of the Shanghai Rolex Masters, very successfully.
Okay, okay. And so there's a lot of opportunity then for more local brands to then...
I think they, certainly since the Olympics, you'll have seen a lot of local brands, you know, doing different types of sponsorship, not necessarily in sports, but certainly as an avenue to complement their existing marketing programs. Sports sponsorship is not a silver bullet of marketing, but it certainly fits well in a comprehensive plan with companies, and I think that's where the opportunity lies, at least with us.
So will China ever have a great male tennis star?
I hope so. I hope so.
Yeah.
Certainly the women have proven, without a shadow of doubt, that the sport of tennis for the Chinese people is something that they can do at the highest levels. The men, unfortunately, have struggled. The men's game has an incredible amount of depth in it. The highest ranked Chinese player has been about 150 in the world. They've had a few good wins, but for one reason or another, it hasn't really happened yet. I'm optimistic. I have to be. That's my job.
Keeping hope alive, right?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
That wraps it up for today. Be sure to subscribe to us on Tudo and YouTube. You can also follow us on Weibo and Twitter and join our LinkedIn group. We'll see you again.